There's the race trader.
The riot alarms screamed through Riverside maximum security just as Pastor David Miller finished his evening prayer. He opened his eyes to chaos. Inmates flooding the corridors, guards retreating to secure positions, the sound of breaking glass and violent shouting echoing off concrete walls. David stood frozen in his cell doorway. He was 62 years old, a former minister serving 8 years for embezzlement from his church, a crime he'd committed to cover his gambling addiction. He wasn't built for this, wasn't prepared for violence. Then he saw them coming down the corridor. 5 members of the Aryan Brotherhood, led by a man called Viper. They were hunting, and from the way Viper's eyes locked onto David's, he was the prey. "There's the race trader," Viper snarled. David had testified against another AB member 3 months ago after witnessing a brutal assault. The Brotherhood didn't forgive snitches. Didn't matter that David had been trying to save a man's life. In their world, he'd signed his own death warrant. David backed into his cell, his legs shaking. This was it. After a lifetime of preaching about facing death with faith, he was about to find out if his own faith would hold. The 5 men entered his cell, blocking the doorway. Viper pulled out a shank, a sharpened piece of metal wrapped in tape. "Nothing personal, Pastor," Viper said, "just business." Then a voice cut through the tension, calm and clear. "Walk away from this." Everyone turned. Standing in the cell doorway was Khalil Rahman, a 47-year-old Muslim inmate who'd been at Riverside for 12 years. Khalil was respected across all groups, not because he was violent, but because he was fair, wise, and completely unafraid. Viper laughed. "This ain't your concern, Rahman. The old man's ours." "No," Khalil said simply. "He's not. You gonna protect a Christian snitch? A race trader?" Khalil stepped fully into the cell, positioning himself between David and the AB members. "I'm going to protect a man who did the right thing, and you're gonna leave, now." The tension ratcheted impossibly higher. 5 armed gang members versus 1 unarmed Muslim inmate. The math was simple. The outcome should have been obvious. But something in Khalil's eyes, a certainty, a complete absence of fear, made Viper hesitate. "You're making a mistake, Rahman," Viper said. "You don't want this problem." "The mistake is yours," Khalil replied. "Walk away now, and this ends here. Stay, and you'll have to go through me. And I promise you, that's not a fight any of you wants during a riot when guards aren't watching." It was a bluff, a magnificent, dangerous bluff. Khalil couldn't take 5 armed men. But his reputation, his absolute calm, his willingness to die protecting someone he barely knew, it made the AB members reconsider. Viper stared at Khalil for a long moment. Then he spat on the floor. "This ain't over." "Yes," Khalil said. "It is." The AB members left. Khalil waited until their footsteps faded, then turned to David, who'd collapsed on his bunk, shaking. "You all right, old man?" David looked up at this Muslim inmate who'd just saved his life. "Why? Why did you do that? You don't even know me." Khalil smiled softly. "The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, 'Help your brother, whether he is an oppressor or he is oppressed.' You are my brother in humanity, that's reason enough." If this story has touched your heart, subscribe to Behind Bars Tales for more powerful stories of faith, humanity, and unexpected bonds from inside America's prisons. Hit that subscribe button now. David Miller had been a respected pastor for 35 years. Senior minister at Grace Community Church in suburban Ohio, he'd counseled hundreds of people, performed countless weddings and funerals, built a congregation of over 800 people. He'd also been a gambling addict in secret. It had started small, lottery tickets, occasional casino trips, but it had grown into a monster that consumed him. When his debts reached $200,000, David had done the unthinkable. He'd embezzled from his church's building fund. The guilt had eaten him alive. He'd confessed before being caught, resigned, turned himself in. But confession didn't erase consequences. The judge had sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison for wire fraud and embezzlement. His wife had divorced him. His congregation had disowned him. His children barely spoke to him. David had lost everything. His calling, his family, his reputation. All he had left was his faith. And some days, even that felt like it was slipping away. Khalil Rahman had been born Kevin Johnson in Detroit. He'd grown up in poverty, joined a gang at 14, and by 22 had a rap sheet that included assault, robbery, and drug trafficking. He'd been heading nowhere fast. Then, in county jail awaiting trial for armed robbery, a cellmate had given him a Quran. Khalil, still Kevin then, had read it out of boredom. And something had shifted. He'd converted to Islam while awaiting sentencing. Took the name Khalil, which meant friend. Started praying 5 times a day. Began studying Arabic and Islamic law. By the time he arrived at Riverside to serve a 20-year sentence, he was a different person. 12 years in, Khalil had become the prison's unofficial mediator. When tensions rose between gangs, they'd call on Khalil. When inmates had disputes, they'd ask Khalil to settle them. He taught classes on conflict resolution. He ran the prison's interfaith council. He'd single-handedly prevented 3 riots through nothing but calm conversation and moral authority. Guards respected him, inmates trusted him, even the warden consulted him on major decisions. But Khalil had never put himself at direct risk like he had tonight. He'd mediated conflicts, yes, but he'd never stood alone against 5 armed gang members to protect someone. When asked later why he'd done it, Khalil would say, "Because in that moment I saw a scared old man who'd tried to do the right thing and was about to die for it. And I couldn't let that happen. Not on my watch. Not in a world where I claimed to serve God." After the riot ended, 3 hours of chaos that left 12 inmates injured and 2 guards hospitalized, David sought out Khalil in the yard. "I never properly thanked you," David said. "You saved my life last night." He looked up and smiled. "No thanks needed, Pastor, just doing what's right." "But you risked everything. Viper and his crew, they won't forget this." "No, they won't," Khalil agreed. "But that's my problem, not yours." David sat down beside him, uninvited. "Can I ask you something? Why do you call me Pastor? I lost that title. I'm a convicted felon. A thief. I stole from my own church." "You're still a man of faith," Khalil said simply. "I can see it in how you carry yourself, how you speak, the way you close your eyes and pray before meals. You made mistakes, we all have, but you're still a pastor in your heart." Tears filled David's eyes. He hadn't heard anyone affirm his faith in 2 years. "I don't deserve that grace." "None of us deserves grace," Khalil said. "That's why it's called grace. We receive it not because we've earned it, but because God is merciful." "You believe in grace? In Islam? We call it Rahmah, mercy. And yes, it's central to everything. Every chapter of the Quran except one begins with "In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful." We serve a God of infinite mercy. David found himself smiling through tears. "That's beautiful. So is Christianity's message of redemption," Khalil said. "We're not as different as people think, you and I." That conversation was the beginning of something neither man expected, a genuine friendship. Over the next weeks, David and Khalil spent hours together. They'd sit in the yard or the library, discussing theology, sharing stories, debating the nature of God and faith and redemption. David learned about Islam, the 5 pillars, the life of Prophet Muhammad, the beauty of Islamic art and poetry. He was shocked by how much Christianity and Islam had in common. Both believed in one God. Both revered Jesus, though in different ways. Both emphasized charity, prayer, justice, and mercy. Khalil learned about David's fall from grace, the addiction, the embezzlement, the crushing guilt. He saw a man genuinely broken by his sins, genuinely seeking redemption. "You know what strikes me about your story?" Khalil said one day. "You confessed before being caught, you turned yourself in. That's real repentance. That's tawbah, true turning away from sin." "But I still did it," David said. "I still stole from people who trusted me." "Yes, and you'll carry that. But carrying guilt isn't the same as being defined by it. You're more than your worst moment." "How do you know?" David asked. "How do you find peace with the things you've done?" Khalil was quiet for a moment. "I killed a man when I was 23. During a robbery. He was a store clerk, 60 years old, probably had grandkids. I shot him because he reached for the phone. I took his life over $300 and a fear of getting caught." David looked at him, shocked. "I didn't know." "Not many people do. It's not something I advertise." Khalil's eyes were distant. "I was sentenced to 20 years, and for the first 2 years I wanted to die. The guilt was crushing. I'd wake up at night seeing his face, hearing his wife scream when she found out. What changed? Islam, faith, understanding that God's mercy is greater than my sins. That doesn't mean I'm not responsible, I'll carry this forever, but it means I'm not doomed. I can still do good. I can still be useful. I can still serve God and help people. How? David asked desperately. How do you live with it? By making every day count, Khalil said. I can't bring that man back. I can't undo what I did, but I can help people here. Prevent violence, teach peace, show younger guys that there's another way. That's my penance. That's my path to redemption. David absorbed this. That's what I'm missing. Purpose. I've been so focused on my guilt that I forgot about redemption. Then find your purpose here, Khalil suggested. You're a pastor. These men need spiritual guidance. Teach them, counsel them, be what you were trained to be. But I'm disgraced. Why would anyone listen to me? Because you understand failure now, Khalil said. Before, you were a man preaching about sin from a position of moral authority. Now you're a man who's lived it. That's more powerful. That's relatable. David started holding Bible studies in his cell. He expected no one to come. But word spread that the old pastor, the one Khalil Rahman had protected, was teaching. The first week, 3 guys showed up. The second week, 7. By the third week, David's cell couldn't hold everyone. The warden gave him permission to use the chapel. David taught differently than he had before. No judgment, no condemnation. Just grace, mercy, and the message that God could redeem anyone, no matter what they'd done. Men who'd never opened a Bible started coming. Men who'd been raised Christian but abandoned faith started returning. Even non-Christians came, curious about what this disgraced pastor had to say. And Khalil came to every session, sitting in the back, supporting his friend. One day, a young inmate named Marcus challenged David. How can you talk about God's forgiveness when you stole from your own church? You're a hypocrite. The old David would have been defensive. But this David, transformed by humility and Khalil's friendship, simply nodded. You're right, I am a hypocrite. I preached about honesty while lying, preached about stewardship while stealing. I'm exactly the kind of person I used to judge from my pulpit. He paused. But that's why I can talk about forgiveness now, because I need it desperately. And if God can forgive me, if he can still use a broken, failed pastor, then he can forgive and use anyone, including you. The room was silent. Then Marcus, this hard young man with tears in his eyes, said, Then maybe there's hope for me too. There's always hope, David said. Always. After the session, Khalil approached him. That was powerful, Pastor. You're becoming who you were meant to be. Because of you, David said. You saved more than my life that night. You saved my faith. But the threat from the Aryan Brotherhood hadn't disappeared. It had just been waiting. 3 months after the riot, Viper made his move. Not against David directly, that would trigger Khalil's protection. Instead, he targeted David's connection to Khalil. Viper spread rumors. He told people that David was converting inmates to Christianity in exchange for protection from the Muslim gang, that Khalil was using David to expand Islamic influence, that their friendship was political, not genuine. It was clever, divisive, designed to create suspicion and resentment. Soon, David started getting threats from inmates who thought he was betraying his faith by associating with Muslims. Khalil received pressure from Muslim inmates who thought he was showing favoritism to Christians. The prison's fragile, interfaith peace began to crack. One day, a group of Christian inmates confronted David in the yard. Their spokesman was a guy named Jake, a former pastor like David who'd committed tax fraud. You're embarrassing us, Jake said. Hanging around with Muslims, acting like their religion is equal to ours. You need to pick a side. I have picked a side, David said calmly. The side of love, mercy, and human decency. Khalil is my friend. That doesn't diminish my faith, it strengthens it. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, Jake quoted. You're compromising the gospel by acting like Islam is valid. I'm not debating theology, David replied. I'm living the gospel. Jesus ate with tax collectors and sinners. He showed compassion to Samaritans, people his culture despised. He taught us to love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. Khalil isn't my enemy, he's my friend. And if you can't understand that, then maybe you need to read the Gospels again. The confrontation ended, but the tension remained. Khalil faced similar pressure. A group of Muslim inmates, led by a man named Ibrahim, cornered him after prayer. You're making us look weak, Ibrahim said. Protecting a Christian, spending all your time with him. People are starting to question your commitment to Islam. My commitment to Islam requires me to protect the oppressed and show mercy, Khalil replied. That's what I'm doing. But he's not one of us. He's human. That makes him one of us. Khalil's voice was firm. The prophet, peace be upon him, stood up when a Jewish funeral procession passed, out of respect for the dead. When asked why, he said, "Was it not a soul? If the prophet honored the dignity of all people, who are we to do less?" "You're being naive," Ibrahim pressed. "These Christians, they think we're going to hell. They think our faith is false. Why should we show them respect?" "Because we're better than that," Khalil said. "Because our faith teaches us to be better than that. Yes, we have theological differences, but that doesn't mean we can't show love, mercy, and respect. That's what true faith looks like." Ibrahim shook his head. "You're going to regret this, Rahman, mark my words." The crisis came during Ramadan, the Islamic holy month of fasting. Khalil had been fasting from dawn to sunset, praying extra prayers, reading Quran. It was the spiritual high point of his year. On the 27th night, Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power, the holiest night of the Islamic calendar, Khalil was in the chapel, deep in prayer. The Christian inmates had graciously given the Muslims use of the space for this special night. David was there too, sitting quietly in the back, not participating, but supporting his friend's worship. That's when Viper struck. He and 4 AB members burst into the chapel, bats and shanks in hand. But they didn't go after Khalil. They went after David. "Thought your Muslim friend would protect you in his church?" Viper laughed. "Think again, old man." Khalil was at the front of the chapel, mid-prayer. By Islamic law, he couldn't break his prayer except for extreme emergency. And technically, David being beaten wasn't his emergency. He could finish his prayer, then intervene. But as Viper raised his bat to strike David, Khalil made a choice. He broke his prayer, a serious thing for a devout Muslim, especially on the holiest night of the year. He threw himself between David and the bat. The bat connected with Khalil's shoulder. He gasped in pain but didn't go down. "You're willing to break prayer for this Christian?" Viper said, shocked. "On Laylat al-Qadr?" "I'm willing to do what's right," Khalil said, his voice steady despite the pain. "Even if it costs me everything." Other Muslim inmates had heard the commotion and were rushing in. So were Christians from the evening Bible study. Within seconds, the AB members were outnumbered 20-5. "You want to hurt this man?" Khalil said, addressing everyone. "You'll have to go through all of us." Jake, the Christian inmate who'd criticized David, stepped forward. "I don't agree with everything Pastor David does, but he's our brother, and if Rahman says he's worth protecting, then we protect him." Ibrahim, the Muslim who'd challenged Khalil, stood beside Jake. "And if our brother Khalil says this is right, then we stand with him." Christians and Muslims side by side protecting a man who'd tried to do the right thing. Viper looked around, saw the unified front, and knew he'd lost. "This isn't over," he muttered, but there was no conviction in his voice. He'd been defeated not by violence, but by something he couldn't understand. Unity built on shared values. After they left, David helped Khalil to his feet. "You broke your prayer for me, on the most important night of your faith." "No," Khalil said, wincing from his injured shoulder. "I fulfilled my prayer, because Islam isn't about rituals for their own sake, it's about submission to God's will. And God's will is that we protect the vulnerable, stand up for justice, and love our neighbors. That's what I did." David embraced him, both men crying. "You're the best Christian I know," David said. "Even though you're Muslim." Khalil laughed through his tears. "And you're the best Muslim I know, even though you're Christian." The incident changed Riverside. The image of a Muslim breaking his holiest prayer to save a Christian, and then Christians and Muslims standing together against a common threat, spread through the prison like wildfire. Inmates who'd been suspicious of the interfaith friendship saw it differently now. They saw two men of genuine faith living their values, not just preaching them. The warden called both men to his office. "What you two have built here, this cooperation between faiths, it's unprecedented. I want to make it official. Would you co-lead a new program, interfaith dialogue and conflict resolution?" David and Khalil looked at each other and smiled. "We'd be honored," they said in unison. Over the next years, David and Khalil transformed Riverside. Their program brought together Christians, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, atheists. everyone really, to talk about values, ethics, and how to live together peacefully despite differences. They taught inmates that faith wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about living rightly yourself, that you could hold your beliefs deeply while respecting others' beliefs completely. Violence dropped 40%, racial tensions decreased, gang activity declined, and it was all because two unlikely friends had shown everyone that bridges were stronger than walls. 8 years after David arrived at Riverside, he was released. Khalil still had 4 years left on his sentence. On David's last day, they stood in the yard together, saying goodbye. "I'm going to miss you, brother," David said, his voice breaking. "We're not saying goodbye," Khalil replied. "We're saying until we meet again. I'll be out in 4 years. And when I am, I'm coming to visit you. You'll always have a place in my home," David promised. "Your family." "Speaking of which," Khalil said, pulling out a letter. "I wrote to your ex-wife, to your kids. I told them about who you've become, about the work you're doing, about the lives you've changed. I asked them to give you a chance." David stared at the letter, tears streaming down his face. "Did they respond?" "Your daughter did. She wants to see you. She's willing to talk." David hugged Khalil so hard they both almost fell. Thank you for everything, for saving my life, for restoring my faith, for giving me hope. Thank you for teaching me that God's love transcends labels and boundaries," Khalil replied. "You made me a better Muslim by being a great Christian." 4 years later, Khalil Rahman was released from Riverside. David was waiting outside the gates, along with his daughter and his grandchildren. A family reunion made possible by Khalil's intervention. Khalil joined David's new ministry, an interfaith community center that served ex-convicts, addicts, and homeless people. Together, they built something beautiful. A place where people of all faiths could come together, support each other, and discover that what united them was stronger than what divided them. They spoke at churches and mosques, telling their story. They wrote a book together called Brothers Behind Bars: How Faith United Us When the World Tried to Divide Us. And every week they'd sit together, a Muslim and a Christian, an imam and a pastor, and share a meal, share their lives, and thank God that he'd brought them together in the unlikeliest of places. Years later at a speaking engagement, someone asked Khalil, "Don't you worry that by being so close with Christians, you're compromising Islamic teachings?" Khalil smiled. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "The believers, in their love, mercy, and compassion for one another, are like one body. If one part of it hurts, the whole body responds with wakefulness and fever." He didn't say only Muslim believers. He said believers, all people of faith, all people of conscience. David added, "And Jesus said, 'By this all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another.'" Not love for only Christians, love for one another, all people. That's the test of real faith. Not how well we recite our scriptures, but how well we love the people who are different from us. "But don't your theological differences matter?" the questioner pressed. "Of course they matter," Khalil said. "I believe Muhammad is God's final prophet. David believes Jesus is God's son. We disagree on fundamental questions, and that's okay. We don't have to agree on everything to love and respect each other." "The older I get," David said, "the more I realize that God is bigger than our theology. Yes, I'm Christian. That's my path to God. But I don't believe God's love is limited to my path. I believe God works in mysterious ways through all kinds of people, and when I see the love, mercy, and wisdom in my brother Khalil, I see God at work. And when I see the grace, humility, and compassion in my brother David," Khalil added, "I see God's mercy manifest. We're both trying to serve the same God, just using different languages, and that's beautiful." They looked at each other and smiled. Two men from different worlds, different faiths, different backgrounds, united by a bond forged in the most unlikely place. A maximum security prison where they'd learned that faith isn't about being right. It's about being faithful, and that sometimes the people most different from us are the ones God sends to save us. Thank you for watching this powerful story from Behind Bars Tales. If this story of faith transcending boundaries moved you, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who needs to understand that our differences don't have to divide us. They can deepen our understanding of God's love. Subscribe now for more incredible stories of faith, hope, and humanity from inside America's prison system. Because sometimes, the walls that imprison us aren't made of concrete, they're made of prejudice and fear. And sometimes, the key to freedom is friendship with someone completely different from ourselves.